You're muted, Volker.
How about now?
Yeah, now it's
better.
Yeah.
I'm just yeah, so I'm just setting up things so we can actually listen to some of my slides, some of the math. Let me have a look. All right. Right. I feel before the break, I talked a lot, and I'm always also aware that when I do these things here on screen, you know, switching between an editor and the browser, and since I really, yeah, at least sometimes know what I'm doing, it might not be as, you know, the learning outcome for you all might not be quite as good as if you have to do it yourself. So this time in the second session, I'll show you a bit about accessibility, and then I want you, or one of you at least, again, to share the screen and do a few things for me. And then we kind of observe together what's happening and what the outcome of some of these changes are. So, right, so what's our goal for the second part of the lecture? It's about making things accessible. Now, when you have math checks on the page, there's a couple of advantages. One is that there are screen readers out there that detect that math checks is on the page and then do some trickery in order to make some of the content that is available there accessible. So NVDA, for instance, if it has an extension library math player installed, it can make some math accessible. JAWS can, so can Chromevox, for instance, which uses effectively the same technology that I will tell you about now, which is kind of the math check's own accessibility extension, which is there and pretty much allows you to make math inside a web page accessible out of the box. Oops, where are we? Here. Right, so the first thing is, here's a quadratic formula. Let's listen to it. Let me switch on a screen reader, and I hope it comes across clear enough.
Chromevox spoken feedback is ready.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Alert.
Oops.
Yes. Accessibility tab. Generic container. Generic container.
Thank you. Generic containers always have.
Section list with 4 items. Listen to the quadratic formula x equals start fraction negative b plus or minus start root b squared minus 4ac end root over 2 or end fraction.
So you could hear Chromevox reading out the quadratic equation. Right? So the reason for this is because simply there is text in the page, in the rendering of the quadratic equation, which is the text that describes the quadratic equation. That's automatically generated, and I'll tell you later how it's being generated. And it's not only automatically generated in the sense that you have single speech, but there is content in the background which allows you to make the formula properly accessible, not just by a single description, which is in an ARIA label, but also by having more detailed descriptions on the single layers of the equation. And I'll show you how that works.
X equals start fraction negative b plus or minus start root b squared minus 4ac end root over 2 or end fraction.
So if we now want to explore this in more detail, we can press return and effectively enter the equation, and that's what's going to happen now.
X equals start fraction negative b plus or minus start root b squared minus 4ac end root over 2 or end fraction.
Right, so what you see, if you can see the slides, you can also see that there's a highlight set behind the equation, and there's even a subtitle which tells you what the speech is. So effectively the subtitle is the same as you can hear from the screen reader. And this now also allows you to navigate that equation, and you can navigate it by diving into it and by walking effectively across various the sub-expressions. So the way you dive into it is by using your cursor keys going down, inwards, outwards is cursor key up, as well as the arrow keys right and left, and let you navigate inside the equation. And let me just go down.
X.
Well, it's not too.
Volker, can you please use your screen shared?
Oh, have I not shared my screen?
No.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. You are not shared.
Is that the right screen? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for paying attention. That's very nice.
I
So,
experience of an end user.
excuse me?
I thought you were giving us the experience of an end user.
Yes, so that was
So.
the beneficial side effect. Thank you very much. So you've now seen what you cannot see when you can't see the slide. So let me just start that again, and it seems.
X.
Oops.
X equals start fraction negative b plus or minus start root b squared minus 4ac end root over 2 or end fraction.
Right. So now what you can see is that we actually walk this equation, and you can walk across, and for some reason, oops, I didn't want it.
X equals start X
Oops. For some reason, my slides start moving. That's not supposed to happen. So I must have screwed something up here. So
Volkan,
yes?
one question. So when is it actually this text get generated? So the fact that you are using a screen reader, so how does that? Because this text is not really incorporated into the document. It is dynamically generated.
Yes, it is dynamically generated by MathJax in the background.
Oh, okay. MathJax is generating. Okay.
Yes. MathJax. So MathJax doesn't do it alone. MathJax calls a system which generates it. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that system later. For the time being, I'll show you a bit more what can give in terms of output.
Start fraction negative b plus or minus start root b squared minus 4ac end root over 2 or end fraction.
So that's one way to read it. You can have different ways how to read it. For instance, just to give you another one, which is called ClearSpeak.
X equals the fraction with numerator negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac and denominator 2r.
Right. So and you can start navigating this, and there's different ways how think about there's different ways how to look at the equation. One is it's different math grammar. So one is called MathSpeak, which gives you a fairly detailed disambiguation. So it tells you when fractions start and when they end. It tells you when square root starts and when square root ends. Whereas this one here is called ClearSpeak, gives you a more natural way to speak things, which works fairly well for small equations or small formulas. It doesn't work that well if things are really complex and nested. But you have kind of the different views you can always use on that equation with MathJax. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about how that happens over the next couple of slides. But for the time being, let me switch off Chromebox because I personally find it very annoying if the screen reader talks over my slides. whoops, how do I, there you go. Right. So what we're interested in is effectively how is the speech computed? As Bala kindly asked, where does that happen? Well, that actually happens in a separate JavaScript library, and the JavaScript library is called Speech Rule Engine. And it's a library which I've started implementing, I think it was 2012. I was a visiting faculty at Google in Mountain View, and we were trying to integrate mathematics reading as kind of a first-class citizen in a screen reader. And then obviously at the time it was Chromebooks, because that's what the people at Google were working on. And so and the library now became a standalone library, which is called Speech Rule Engine. What the idea is, you give it an XML expression, for instance, a MathML expression. It does interpretation on it and then generates speech or various other types of output for explanatory output for that expression. It runs on a browser, it runs on a command line. It's being used by MathJax, for instance, but it's also being used still by Chromebox, by other systems. Equatio, which I'm hoping to show you at some point next week. MathLife is one of these libraries I've been talking about earlier, which does math rendering on the web, which uses SRE in the background in order to do the speech, and so on. So in many ways, there's a lot of libraries out there that do math in the foreground. In the background, when you have accessibility, it often comes down to my library. And what's the first thing now we want to play with is how can we actually switch on that speech output? So I've switched it on on the slides here because I've just put the configurations in there accordingly. And there's various ways how to do this. One way is to use what's called the MathJax context menu. That is generally in the page automatically, and you can get to it by right-clicking on an expression. That can switch on the basic speech output. And alternatively, we can give it configuration options. So I'll show you quickly if I can find my original. Let me go to the example that we always been using. So that's the Rademacher, for instance. Here it is. Oops, I wasn't intended. Anyway, so there it is. There's the. So initially when you're here, I'm pressing. I'm on a math expression. For those who can't see it, I'm on a math expression. I hit enter. Nothing's happening. Right. I'm on another math expression. So one thing I can do is I can switch it on. With the context menu. So that's normally a right click or just a space because it's accessible, and then you can walk down the menu and you can activate the whole thing. And then the speech is being generated in the background, and the next time I press enter, it can take a while. Sorry, there's obviously some some label issues in the page, which we haven't sorted out yet. And then the next time I press enter, I get the speech for the expression, and I can start navigating it and so on and so forth. Also, what happens is on the context menu, you now everything that was previously grayed out is now available. So you have all kinds of options for speech and for highlighting and what do you want highlighted, and the colors you can choose and so on and so forth. There's a lot of different options available. For instance, now we can change the color of the background to red, and we can change the intensity of the color of the background and do all kinds of things with it. And we can always quit the exploration mode using escape. Right, so that's one way how to do it. Now another way is you can use a configuration, and that's something I would like you to try. Who would like to share their screen? Who has a working example? Anyone? Or do you want me to continue talking on?
Working example meaning the one that we did last
The
class.
one from last week or any of the others? Yes. If you want to share your screen, if you, I mean, you don't have to. I don't want to force anybody to work on that.
Yeah, I got a rad masher file. Did you mean that?
Yes, for instance. I mean, really, all I wanted to see is if you just, yeah. So if you open that into right, so here is in the browser. Right. So if you go on the, yes, can you click? No. Yes, go for, no, don't, please not. Right. So accessibility is not on. If you click on the math expression and hit return, what happens? On the math expression.
On the expression, okay.
Yeah.
I click.
You hit return. What happens?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. Now I want you to open the file, the rademacher.html file in an editor. Right. Use, I don't know what you're using. Yes, text edit is good.
Okay. Like this.
Oh, no, yeah, but we want to see the actual HTML and we want to see the plain text. Is that possible?
I don't know how to do that here.
Oh, okay.
Should I open the source code from here?
No, because that won't work. Why won't it work? If we alter the source code there and then look at it, MathCheck is already in the page. It will not pick up the configuration that we're trying to give it. Which one did you? Is notes? What do you have some sort of a? Oh, isn't that? Do you have an Emacs? Sorry, you have VI. Something very straightforward and trivial. Notepad on Windows works as well.
Text edit should work, right? I don't know why it doesn't. Yeah, maybe someone else can do it.
Akila, you can open in Notepad.
I don't have Notepad. I have a Mac. I don't. Text edit is opening it like a Word file.
All right.
Maybe someone else.
You go to the format and say plain text. That's what happens.
Oops.
No,
Many things are happening. I don't understand really what's going on. But if you go to the very beginning now, can we see where the? Oh, that's just plain text. No, that's not what we want to see. No, sorry. Okay, let me just stare my screen for the time being.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for the attempt, though. But so yeah, so this is again the take-home message. It's always important if you make any of these changes, go to a pure ASCII editor. It's these WYSIWYG editors. I mean, they're very nice. They show you how it's being displayed, how the HTML looks like. But if you want to actually do some changes to the HTML, to the configurations, etc., you really need something in which you can edit code. So, I mean, on if you have Visual Studio, for instance, Visual Studio also works very well for these things. You know, no worries there. But otherwise, you know, just on Macs, I'm not quite sure what works there. But you know, you can have an Emacs, you can have a VI, you can have anything on a Mac, I think. On Windows, Notepad Extended, all of that works well too. Word doesn't.
Share my screen.
Would you like to share your screen?
Yes,
Yes,
I can.
please.
I've just pulled from your repo, and I hope all examples are there in it now. So which example?
Yes, go to math example, please.
Math example.
In the HTML?
Let's have a look at that one. Yeah, let's have a look at that one. I don't know what that does. Okay, so this one is that, right? Yes. Seems to be stuck rendering here. We don't really know what's going on. All right.
This is not.
I don't know. I think this is the version where it's not properly rendered. Let me just, because I'm mindful of the time, shall just take over. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for putting you all on the spot. That was not really, wasn't very nice. I'm sorry. I'll show you the first two things I want to happen. Switching on the speech output. We can switch on the speech output directly with menu settings, but I don't really want to spend too much time on that now. Here's a different view of a mathematical equation. If I hit that one, what happens? It computes the speech, but the speech it computes, for those of you who can't see the subtitle, is now actually in Braille. So that's an alternative view. It's an alternative view on the text, and you can still do the same thing. You can still navigate the expression and so on and so forth. Here, the navigation does not change the page, which is good. So you can navigate over and you get everything. But just now you get Braille output. And what we're now going to do is we're now going to change our original document, the Rademacher document, and we add customization so that speech and Braille rendering will be automatically in the page. And I'll show you how to do that. So this one is, this here is, I think, our original, where it is? That's the Pandoc version, right? Yes.
I have
let me just
the texted, but maybe you can go ahead.
Right. So here I've this is the Rademacher, and I've put in this little configuration. So what does that configuration do? Well, first of all, it tells me to switch on the Explorer. So that was what we've seen earlier in the context menu. So we tell now, well, regardless of the menu, just switch this particular part on automatically. So it's called Explorer True. Then additional things we do is we do a render action. I'll show you in a second what that is. And we'll do options on the accessibility output. In that case, for instance, we change the background color to green. And we switch on Braille automatically, as well as Braille subtitles. So that's this view Braille. And now we have a look at how that actually looks like in the output. Right. So the first thing is here's the document. If I now hit the right button, I do get a menu popping up, but this is no longer the math checks menu because I explicitly have switched that off, right? I can switch it on again. I'll do that afterwards. And when I now start entering that particular expression, this is a particularly large expression. Let's go to a smaller one first. I'll press enter, and then I'll get the Braille as subtitles, right?
Volker, this is the Braille of the text version, or this is Nemeth Braille? Like this is.
That is Nemeth Braille. This is Nemeth Braille.
Okay.
This is
not
Nemeth.
okay.
No, this is Nemeth. So we only support currently one Braille version, and that's Nemeth. We're hoping to support more at some point in the future, but right now it's primarily it's Nemeth, and
the idea is that this will be basically given to a Braille display.
Yes.
Yeah, because if you are giving audio, then there's no need to do that. So this is primarily you're going to push it into a Braille display. That's the idea.
Yes. Let me switch on. Let me switch. Okay, so I'll go back to our configuration. I'll take this render action out. What the render action did was it disables the menu, because sometimes that's nice to do. Let me just take this out and let's re-render the page. And it takes a while longer because now we're rendering all the speech. So that takes a bit. But now the menu is back and I can see what I have actually, what's switched on and switched off. So the speech is on. Let's switch on speech subtitles as well, just for the fun of it. And now we get to both types of subtitles. And just to explain to you what Bala is referring to here is we get speech. All these, technically these are done in ARIA live region. So we get the speech, which is being sent to the screen reader. The second one contains exclusively Unicode Braille element. If a speech reader gets that, a screen reader gets those, and a Braille display is connected, it automatically pushes these through to the Braille display. Right? If no Braille display is connected, and that can be a bit annoying, and it's switched on, then depending on the screen reader, they sometimes try to speak these out. Which is obviously not what you want. You don't want it to say things like Unicode Braille .5.6. Right? This is not useful. That's why by default Braille is switched off, speech is switched on, but you can, as I said, you can change that both in the context menu, which is this one, right, as well as in the configuration. And what is important to understand there is when you do these things. Here's the configuration I've put in there earlier. Is that when you enter this configuration, this can still be overwritten by whatever the user wants to do with their context menu, right? So if I change something in the page and then the user afterwards does a change to it via the context menu, this will be the permanent change for the user. The idea is that you can actually kind of customize the document, and then you can still personalize to the needs of the user. Right, but now what's really the interesting thing is how is all this really done in the background? Right? There's all this speech happening, there's the Braille happening, there's the navigation happening, and there's actually more things that you can have happening. I mean, I can switch on a few more of these. So, for instance, one thing we can switch on is, say, how about magnification, right? So now what I see, or what if you can see that in addition to getting the speech and the Braille output, you also get magnification, you get goal-directed magnification, whatever it's being currently traversed, you can also get it in a larger format, rendered, and so on and so forth. So there's all kinds of, and there's additional things in the background which you can all use. But all of these in many ways depend very much on having that information somewhere in the page so you can use it. Right? Obviously, the information is initially not there because all we have is the original LaTeX, which is being converted by Pandoc or Make4HT, and then that LaTeX is then being rendered with math checks. And what it does then is it uses this little speechal engine library in order to get semantics into the page and semantics for the mathematical expression. And that is a non-trivial task, how to do this. And I'll show you a bit why this is a non-trivial task in the last remaining few minutes of the lecture. And then we'll have a deeper dive into the semantics of the next week.
Can you repeat this discussion about customization and personalization for the user? So what you're saying is when you switch it on, it's also possible to get it incorporated into the document in a personal version?
Yes. Okay, so yeah, so maybe yes. So I've gotten over that a bit quick. Sorry about that. All right, so think about there's 3 different ways how a document is being customized, right? So there's the default settings that come with math checks. If you only load just the pure math checks into the page, then this is how the document will be rendered, whatever our default settings are. Now, these default settings can be changed in the page by the page author in a way, or by whoever puts the content on the web, by giving a configuration element. Now, that configuration element can pretty much configure anything you like, in particular in terms of accessibility. It can change things like the background colors, whether speech is switched on or off, and all these things, right? It can do these. However, if you have the context element in the context menu in the page, then the user can make these changes as well. And the changes the user does will always override the changes that are already in the page. So the configurations in the page will step back, and the configurations the user does will take precedence.
So this is more to do with the basically the configuration. So
yes, and the important thing is as well that whatever you've done as configuration changes as a user, that will be remembered in the local storage of the browser. So we used to use cookies, but cookies are frowned upon these days. So nowadays, this is being done with local storage, meaning that if I have changed my configuration for math checks locally as a user to use a particular background color, or use always magnification, then this will be remembered and will be used from there on, regardless of whatever the author of the page has put in as configuration changes. So the idea is that you have default behavior, customized behavior for a document, and then personalized behavior for the special needs of the reader.
Thank you.
Right. So that's the technical setup of these personalizations, but how do we actually get the accessibility in that way into the page? Well, one thing is important if you do mathematics is that you have to define things like reading order and explore or navigation order and all these things specifically for mathematics. And normally this does not correspond to anything we've seen before, where we had kind of reading order defined by section and regions and all that kind of thing. So the normal region containers obviously will not help for mathematics. One problem is that mathematics is primarily authored in order to be displayed, meaning that there's not all that much semantics in a mathematical expression, at least not in the mathematical expressions as you find them in the wild, because in the wild you normally get them as LaTeX, sometimes as MathML, and in that case it's normally presentation MathML. Now I've got 2 examples here for you. That's just the quadratic formula, not the formula, sorry, just the quadratic equation, even simpler. It is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now that is just a single line with one exception, where the x square tells you that this is really a 2-dimensional. You have a superscript index. And if you look at that in different versions, in LaTeX, it's effectively just a single line with a little caret symbol, which distinguishes the 2. And in XML, which is in that case MathML, you've got a similar case. Everything is a single row. The only slight markup change is for the superscript element. But obviously, that's not necessarily what you want. What you really want is to be able to say, well, this is an equation, and what do you have on the left-hand side of the equation, right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side you have a sum, and which you then can navigate in the way we've seen earlier. So, and the way this is happening is that the speech-rule engine kind of disassembles the whole thing, just looks at the visual or kind of the 2-dimensional layout, and recomposes things in the semantic way as much as possible. And I'll show you how that really works visually. And this is just the quadratic formula here. And I'm mindful that not everybody can see that, unfortunately. But what happens here is that there's a tree display of the reinterpreted expression, which kind of does this this correct interpretation of the equation, which just says, equation on the left hand side you've got a sum with 3 sum, and on the right hand side you've got 0. And this is effectively the semantic that we have as an interpretation. And that semantic is then being injected on the page. And how that's being injected on the page, this is, and what different ways there are of injecting semantics into mathematical expression and other STEM content. This is where we're going to start next week. And this is what we're going to explore in more details, first for mathematics, later for diagrams and other visual STEM content. And so we skip the last 5 slides, and instead we're going to the outlook for next week is that we dive a lot deeper into semantics, how to get it into the document, and then we also talk about more general math document issues and other issues that might arise when it comes to accessibility and usability of documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions, please?
Thank you, Volker.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, any questions, please? Sorry, I haven't really paused a lot.
So I think next week I would request 2-3 of you at least should be ready with taking over from Volker after the break, okay? So that we give his throat some rest.
Yes, that would be very nice. I also feel like it's more helpful for people when things move slowly by somebody who's doing it for the first time than me.
Prepare yourself to sort of do with the background. Be prepared with the background. Check it out and can try to just repeat what he has done today so that you get familiar with navigating through this. Good. If there are no other questions, then everyone has a nice weekend, and we will see you on Monday.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Volker. This is Subbu from TNQ. Do you hear me?
Oh, hello. How are you?
How are you? How are things going? How do you do?
All right. My voice is gone now.
Yeah. I think you have some health issues.